Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to Mako's Mythic Menagerie. Today I wanted to talk about something a little different than what I normally do, and I wanted to cover 5 Pokemon from the Kanto region that kind of take inspiration from mythical creatures of our own mythology. But first, I've got a couple of honorable mentions. So I feel like everyone knows about the myth where Magikarp draws its lore from, and just in case you don't know, I'll cover it real quick. So the story goes that long ago there was this waterfall, and there was a group of carp that would try to swim up this waterfall, and every time they attempted it, they would fail and fall back down into the stream. However, there was this one carp who struggled more than any other, and after years of perseverance, he managed to make it to the top, upon which the gods transformed him into a mighty dragon as a reward for his resilience. And that's kind of why Magikarp turns into a dragon without being a dragon type. Alright, so that's kind of one that you probably already heard 100 times. But one that you might not know, and that I find slightly more interesting, is that Charmander's family line does not just derive from Charizard being a fire-breathing dragon. No. So, during the medieval era, salamanders were actually synonymous with fire, and the reason for that is that as people were clearing out forests for their settlements, they would go through and hack down trees, and they would use those trees to build houses and halls and anything that they might need. But the dead and decaying and sodden logs that they could not use, they would just burn. But unfortunately, inside these logs often would be the home for salamanders. And once they set these logs ablaze, the salamanders would skitter off trying to get away from the heat and the fire. And so the people, not knowing what these creatures were, they would just see these small lizard-like beings running away in a plume of fire, and that led to the belief that salamanders were born of fire and smoke. And so they kind of took from that mythology and incorporated it from salamander to fire-breathing dragon in the whole line. A little bit morbid when you think that the name Charmander literally comes from charred salamander. So let's not dwell on that. Into our top 5. Number 5, Drowsy. So as you may know, Drowsy is based off of the tapir. And not just the tapir, but also the Japanese name for tapir is the Baku, which just so happens to be a yokai with the power to eat nightmares and bad dreams. So the Baku is originally from Chinese lore, and it became popular in Japan during the Muromachi era, which took place from the 14th to the 15th century. They were said to have the ability to eat nightmares, as I said, and were described to be kind of like a small Chinese chimera that was shy in nature and had the trunk of an elephant, the eyes of a rhino, an ox's tail, and the paws of a tiger, kind of exaggerating the features of the real-life tapir. But legend tells that any child having a nightmare could wake and repeat 3 times, "Baku-chan, come and eat my dream." And then this would allow the tapir, it would call the tapir forth, and the tapir would eat that dream, and it would allow the child to have a sound sleep for the rest of the night. But this must be done sparingly, as a hungry Baku could also feast on your hopes and your desires, and could lead you to live a shallow, hollow and meaningless life. So, very, you'll see it a lot with Japanese lore. Even the most helpful of yokai, it's like a double-edged blade, you know? It's like, yes, this thing can help children sleep peacefully through the night, but also you misuse its power, and you're suddenly living a 9-to-5 job, hating your life. Number 4 is Ninetales. Now, Ninetales is based off of a much more commonly known yokai, I feel like, obviously being the Kitsune or the nine-tailed fox. You see this in other forms of media like Naruto. So, Kitsune is just the Japanese name for fox, as they saw no distinction between the yokai and the animal. Believed was that all foxes had the ability to take human form once they hit 100 years old. And as these foxes aged, they would not only gain more tails, they would gain more power and more wisdom. And as they would hit each milestone, each 100 years, their tail would split. And so a Kitsune could have anywhere from 1 tail to 9 tails, and upon hitting 1,000 years old, they would grow that 9th tail, and they would turn a majestic, like, white or gold color. And 9 tails definitely pulls from that, as we see its normal color being a golden, sleek shine, and then its shiny is a silvery white color. So there were believed to be 2 sets of Kitsune. You had the Zenko, or good foxes, that were believed to be helpful spirits, and then you had the Yako, or field foxes, which were more mischievous tricksters that would try to take advantage of the farmers. And many tales tell of the Kitsune turning into young women to entice men, but the foxes would not be able to hide their tails in their human form. So an easy way to find out if the woman you were talking to was actually a Kitsune was either to get them drunk and then try and see under their dress, see if they had a tail, or just to take them around dogs, in which case their natural fear would cause them to run in terror. Number 3 is Lapras. And now this one's a little bit different. Whereas the other ones were mythological creatures, this one's a cryptid. So if you didn't know, Lapras is based off of Nessie, the affectionately named Loch Ness Monster. And the Loch Ness Monster itself seems to appear much like a prehistoric animal, similar to the plesiosaur. So they kind of take from both inspirations, the Loch Ness Monster, the plesiosaur. Perhaps one of the earliest sightings of Nessie was by D. Mackenzie in the 1870s, who didn't report his sighting until the 1930s, when other people were kind of coming out with their accounts. And one of such an account was an article that kind of put Nessie on the map, written by Alex Campbell in the Inverness Courier. It tells of a large beast or whale-like fish swimming in Loch Ness. And this kind of stirred up attention, and it's been history ever since. So, over the years, there have been countless reports of the Loch Ness Monster that have been debunked, but no one has been able to adequately prove that such a creature lives in the loch. Luckily, we have Lapras to ferry us through the world of Pokemon. Number 2 is Tangela. So, a fun fact about Tangela is that its original name was actually Medusa, which obviously alludes to its origins being Medusa. And Medusa was a woman from Greek mythology said to have snakes for hair and the ability to petrify anyone who stared her in the eye. She's referenced all over pop culture, one of the most prominent figures in Greek mythology. So Medusa was said to be the only mortal in a group of 3 sisters known as the Gorgons, and the other 2 were known as Stheno and Euryale. So the myth goes that the hero Perseus was tasked with retrieving Medusa's head for the king Polydectes, and it was supposed to be this impossible to obtain gift. So, having pity on him, some of the gods gifted him with a few items that would help him achieve his goal, such as Athena giving him a polished shield that reflected things like a mirror so that he could gaze at Medusa through the reflection and not be turned to stone. He also received winged boots from the god Hermes, and he used those to escape after he beheaded Medusa. It is said that when he achieved his goal of beheading Medusa, her 2 children actually sprang from the stump of her neck, and those children were Pegasus, the winged horse, and a human child known as Chrysaor, who went on to be a prominent figure in Greek mythology himself. Now, Medusa's 2 sisters obviously pursued Perseus in hopes of getting their revenge for the wicked crimes done to their sister, but this is where Hermes' boots came in to effect, because Perseus was able to fly away and avoid capture. And it was stated that even after being beheaded, Medusa's head, her gaze, still had the ability to turn anything that looked into her eyes to stone. So it was able to be used as a weapon in the future by various Greek mythological figures. So you can kind of see where some of the inspiration for Tengela comes from. Luckily, the Pokemon adaptation was not as morbid as just having a severed head be a capturable and trainable creature. They gave it the little red boots, which are adorable. Now, number 1 is Arcanine, but before I get into its mythological counterpart, I wanted to give you guys a little story about me, kind of get to know each other a little bit more, or at least you guys get to know me a little bit more about me. So I have a deep personal connection with Arcanine. As a child, on the playground, of course, we all used to play Pokemon cards, and none of us knew the rules of the Pokemon card game. So we would just, we would sit around and we would take our strongest Pokemon cards and we would fight it out until only one of us was left. And I don't know where the suggestion came from, but we eventually started doing this for keeps. Whoever won got to pick their favorite card of the opponent, and then that opponent could not complain when their card was taken. It was kind of an agreement. It was, to my knowledge, brought up like we were kids of our word. We stuck to our own code of morality. Once you lost your card, you could not complain. Couldn't be a snitch. So, anyways, I had this Arcanine card that I was in love with, and the Arcanine card would win me so many battles, and people stopped wanting to play with me because I kept taking their best cards. And so eventually a friend of mine told me about this 5th grader who also played Pokemon. And now we were in like 2nd or 3rd grade, so for us, this kid was basically an adult, you know, he's a 5th grader. So I was like, oh yeah, I can take him on. I'm gonna cement my place as the best Pokemon player ever. So after school, we all lived in the same neighborhood, so we walked over and we went over to his house, and I was like, I challenge you, you know, kind of like the anime, I challenge you to a battle. And I was stomped. I was devastated, and Devon took my precious Arcanine card, and I was just devastated for weeks afterwards.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
But anyways, let's get into some of the origins for Arcanine. So Arcanine takes inspiration from the Koma Inu, which are the lion dogs that are popular in Japanese culture, and they're often seen in pairs, and they guard shrines or other important buildings. They are meant to ward off evil spirits. Now, it's believed that the inspiration for the Koma Inu is the lion pelts that came along the Silk Road from places like the Middle East and India. It's said that, like most things in Japanese culture, these were kind of taken from parts of China and adopted and changed over the years to adapt to Japanese culture. They were originally made out of wood with iron fittings, but eventually they began to be built outside to guard the doors of any important dwelling. So they needed to be made out of stone in order to endure the rain that was so common in Japan. Starting in the Edo period, we see other animals start to be used, such as wild boar, tigers, dragons, and probably most commonly the fox, harkening back to foxes being seen as powerful mythical beings. But still, we still see the Koma Inu as a common depiction of keeping evil spirits at bay. They kind of are the Asian equivalent of Europe's gargoyles. So in the Gothic era, we saw a lot of gargoyles in parts of Europe. Koma Inu served the same purpose in China and Japan and other parts of Asia. So yeah, that kind of is everything I wanted to touch on today. Thank you for watching. Hit like and subscribe if you want. Tune in next time when I talk about something else.